Hey, Amy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Tom.
Yeah, it's great to have you. So if you haven't met Amy yet, Amy Newmark is the publisher, editor-in-chief, and co-author of the book series Chicken Soup for the Soul. By curating and editing inspirational true stories from ordinary people who have had extraordinary experiences, Amy has kept the 22-year-old Chicken Soup for the Soul brand fresh and relevant and selling millions of copies. Amy, it's great to have you.
Well, thanks. We worked really hard to attain this success. I mean, I've been up till 11 every night, worked all 4 days of the Thanksgiving weekend, getting our next book ready to go to the printer. It's a lot of work to be successful in publishing.
Definitely. So tell us, how did you get started in the industry?
So I have a rather circuitous route that took me here because I was basically on Wall Street and in business for most of my career. But I was always a writer. I mean, I've been a writer my entire life from kindergarten when I first discovered words. I always wrote for fun. Other kids would be upset when they had to write papers for school. I would just write on my own because I enjoyed it so much. And I ended up going to Wall Street and I analyzed the telecommunications industry. But being a Wall Street analyst involves writing because you are telling stories. You're finding companies you think would make great investments and then you're writing stories about them. And I think that's what made me a good analyst, was because I could write compelling stories, because everything in business is about stories, right? I mean, everything that mankind has to do with is about telling stories in a compelling way that makes people interested and that properly communicates. I mean, if you think about wisdom and culture and advice, the way we have passed it on for thousands of years, back around the campfire, was always through storytelling. So really, my Wall Street career was all about telling stories. And I was on Wall Street and then in business for 30 years. I used to write the annual reports for my company, write the press releases. It's always been about writing. And then my husband and I were looking for something new to do. I was on a whole bunch of corporate boards. He had just finished at a big company that he ran. I had just turned 50. I had just sent the last child off to college. So we could have retired, but instead we decided to do this insane thing. And at the very beginning of the recession, which was a terrible recession back in 2007, 2008, and when Borders was failing and Barnes & Noble was closing stores and hundreds of independent bookstores were closing, we did this really stupid thing and we bought a publishing company. We bought Chicken Soup for the Soul. So that was 2008, and we survived the terrible recession in publishing, and now we're doing great. Our book sales are up a lot this year, and we're having a lot of fun, even though we're working really, really hard.
That's awesome. So what made you want to buy the business? Like what potential did you see there that maybe the previous owners didn't see?
Well, I think they saw the potential. So the Chicken Soup for the Soul was founded by Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen, and they were motivational speakers who used storytelling in their speeches. And then finally were asked, hey, take all those great stories that you tell and put them into a book. And that's when the first Chicken Soup for the Soul book came out in 1993. So they ran the business for 15 years and they loved it, but they weren't the right ones to take it into the internet age and to take the Chicken Soup for the Soul stories and the brand and all of our goodwill and redeploy them in other industries as well. And they had very successful they had very successful motivational speaker careers. They were writing books that weren't Chicken Soup for the Soul books. So they were looking for the right people who would come and take this company over and carry on their legacy and carry it on the right way, keeping all of the goodness about Chicken Soup for the Soul, but still moving it forward in the business sense. And so my husband had been a movie producer, had been one of the first people in what's called new media. It was called new media back then. It's just called the internet and everything that we do now. And he knew what to do with the brand. He knew how to take it beyond the bookshelf. I sat down and read 100 of the old books, having never read any of them before except the first one. And I discovered that I was really excited about the books, and that after decades of writing reports about numbers and analyzing balance sheets and all of that, that inside me was lurking a chicken soup for the soul author and editor-in-chief. And so we did it. We bought the company, and it's been wild ever since. It's been really fun, though. And I've published, I believe it's 134 new Chicken Soup for the Soul books since we took over in April of 2008.
Wow, that's a lot of books.
I know, it's insane. And now I have it down to a more normal level, which is about one book a month, but that's still crazy. You know, I tell people in the publishing industry that we publish one book a month, and then I tell them how many people I have in my little publishing department within our company, and they just can't believe that we do it. But my team is amazing, and we all work 7 days a week, and we do it.
That's awesome. So you talked about kind of taking the company into the internet age, right? And I know that's a big thing in the industry. We've talked about that a little bit in the show, this transmedia concept where you take, a book that's a brand and you take that into other platforms like websites and blogs and apps and video games and TV series and movies and all these different, platforms you can use to get your message out to more people, right? So how are you using the brand and your books to reach more people through platforms outside of the book itself?
Okay, I'll go through some of the things we're doing. I probably will leave something out because I don't have a list in front of me, but not in any particular order. I'll tell you all of the other things that we do. First of all, in publishing outside of the normal Chicken Soup for the Soul books, we also publish other things. We publish what we call skinny books. So, for example, there is a gift pack at Walmart this Christmas, 2016, which contains a Chicken Soup for the Soul box of soup, chicken soup, 2 mugs or 1 mug, I forget how many mugs, and a skinny version of one of our books. And so we find new ways to take our stories and repackage them into different shaped books, skinnier books, etc. We also have a massive effort in our publishing department. We have a nationwide bullying prevention program. We're rolling it out in schools all over the United States. We've already been approved in Dallas, in New York City, in other big markets. And teachers have used our stories for 20 years in the classrooms, but not in an organized fashion with a real curriculum. And so we now have gone into those schools with our stories for kids that help them learn good values, tolerance, respect, compassion, kindness. All of these good values crowd out any bullying behavior that might manifest itself. Because we do believe that every kid is a good kid, and if you crowd out the bullying behaviors, you have a much better classroom experience. And so we have a very, very good curriculum that fits right into the literacy part of the day. We've already rolled it out for first grade through 5th grade. We're now rolling out 6th grade through 8th grade, and then we're going to roll out high school next year. And this program takes our stories that teachers have loved to use and combines them with a curriculum that meets all of the state standards and all of the federal standards. So we meet all 50 state standards, all the national standards. It's a serious curriculum. And so it's been very well received. So that's another thing we're doing with our brand, and we're very excited about that.
Is that a business effort, or so how do you make a profit from that?
Well, we're doing it in conjunction with a foundation. There is a wonderful man named Dr. Milton Boniak and his wife Lori and his children who have a foundation down in Houston. And their foundation does a lot of good work, but one of their biggest concerns is tolerance and kindness and respect and compassion. And they have subsidized this program essentially so that we can put it out there at an extremely affordable price for the schools. So it's partly a nonprofit venture, But of course, we have to make payroll as well. So there's some profit in it as well. And then we also do a lot of other nonprofit work. We actually make our books available to nonprofits through our contributors, the people who write our stories. We allow them to buy our books at a discounted price to resell for fundraising for nonprofits. We also work with big nonprofits. We have raised tens of thousands of dollars for the Alzheimer's Association through a book that we made with them called Living with Alzheimer's and Other Dementias. We have been working for years with American Humane. We put books out with them where we give them the royalties from the books. We provide tons of food to animal shelters every year, because we also have another business, which is a high-end, super premium dog food and cat food business. And we donate tons of food from our pet food business to shelters. That's a nationwide effort. We do that in conjunction with American Humane. There's a number of other charities we work at. We did a book last Mother's Day with the Boys and Girls Clubs of America, and we donated the royalties from that book to the Boys and Girls Clubs. So we're constantly finding ways that we can use our books to raise money for nonprofits. So that's what's going on in publishing. Then I mentioned our pet food business, and that has been growing by leaps and bounds because it's really good food. So a lot of breeders recommend it. Dog magazines recommend it. You know, when people do the analysis of the ingredients, we always get wonderful reports. And dogs and cats like it. It tastes really good. Then we also have a television business. We have 2 shows on the air right now with more shows coming. The newest show, it's so much fun. It's called Project Dad. And we have 3 celebrity dads who come off the road and stay home with their kids alone for a few days. And we have hidden cameras all over the place, and we see what happens. And we see the dads bond with their children. And it's really nice. It's on Discovery on Tuesday nights, and then it will be on TLC in January. They'll rerun the whole first season of it. We also have a great show that works in conjunction with our bullying prevention program, and it's called Chicken Soup for the Soul's Hidden Heroes, and that's on CBS on weekend mornings. So there's that going on. There's a movie in development, but I can't tell you when it's going to happen because movies take forever. We also have our whole website, which has been dramatically changed during the time that we've owned the company. And if you go to the website, you can read stories for free. There's a lot of great content on the website. Guided journals. We have a new thing out. So everybody in publishing knows about adult coloring books, right?
Yeah, it's been really hot recently.
Yeah, much to my chagrin. I don't know what your other authors think, but it really hurts when you get on a bestseller list and then you see that, you know, there are 10 slots and 8 of them are held by coloring books. And then there you are at number 9. You're thinking, oh my gosh, I have the best book, but I got 8 coloring books ahead of me. We don't currently have a coloring book business, but we have what I think is even more exciting than coloring books. And this I like because this brings us back to storytelling and to spreading good messages again. We have a new thing out called guided journals, and they're sold in the same places as the adult coloring books. They're sold on newsstands and on a website called newsstandsnow.com. But these guided journals are beautiful. I'm looking to see if I have one. Oh, here's one. I will show it to you. So this is what they look like. They're small enough you could carry them in a bag. And they're for people who love to journal, but with some guidance. So they read a Chicken Soup for the Soul story, and then they fill out a little journal about it. They write down some keywords they learned from it, or they learn something about themselves and they write it down. But it's really, really fun. And so we have that. And I'm sure we have other stuff, but that's what I can think of right now in terms of us having expanded the Chicken Soup for the Soul brand into other areas.
Awesome. And what's the price point on that guided journal?
I think it's $9.95. Let's see. I'm not going to wear glasses until I'm 60. I decided, so here I go with my little, I got this at Barnes & Noble, little magnifier. Where is the price on this thing? $9.99. $9.99. It's really nice. I like it. The second one just came out. I don't have that to show you though.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, we talked before we started recording about, the success of Chicken Soup for the Soul and how it's kind of unique because there aren't a ton of nonfiction book series, right? So, in the fiction world, pretty much everyone understands that, authors who write, trilogies or series tend to do better financially, especially in the long run, right? But with nonfiction, there's a lot of people who say, I'm going to create this great nonfiction series, but very few are actually successful, right? So what do you think separated Chicken Soup for the Soul from everyone else, and what are you doing differently? Because it's not that easy to just create a nonfiction book series and to do really well.
That is true. And during the time that I've been the publisher of Chicken Soup for the Soul, and now it's almost 9 years, I have seen so many people try to replicate what Chicken Soup for the Soul does, and 100% of them have failed. And I probably sound like I'm throwing down a challenge, and one of your listeners might be like, okay, I'm going to do it now. But it just hasn't worked. I've even seen, big, well-funded publishing houses try to do it, and they have failed too. So I think it's partly because we do have such a good brand name, and people know what we stand for, and so we have the distribution that newcomers might not have. But I think it's also that we have a much greater reach in terms of bringing in stories, because to get the quality that we have in our books, you need thousands of submissions for each book. So, for example, we have a new book out right now called Chicken Soup for the Soul, The Joy of Christmas. And this is the paperback bestseller in Canada right now. I think it's #1 in Canada. And it's #8 on the paperback nonfiction list in the United States, according to BookScan. So we had 6,000 submissions for this Christmas book, and we published 101 stories. I don't think many people can get that number of submissions. We have about 6,000 people on an email list who we send an email to whenever we're collecting for a new book, but we also post what we're looking for on our website, and people come to that. And then different writers' websites, blogs, people start telling each other what we're looking for, and then people will just pass on the emails. Somebody will get the email saying, we're looking for stories for a Christmas book, and she'll send it on to her sister and say, you have a great story, send it into Chicken Soup for the Soul. So we're always hearing from new writers who we've never met before. So we read all of those thousands of submissions that come in for each book, and then we publish the cream of the crop, and then we do a lot of editing. So some stories come in great shape and need very little editing. Some stories need to be completely rewritten. I sometimes will spend an hour or more with one story, one 1,000-word story, just reshaping it, moving stuff around, deleting, writing what I think the person meant to say, writing a new conclusion for the story, stuff like that. And so the product that we publish is really, really excellent. It is so high quality. And it's cohesive too, because I take those 101 stories, and there's a story arc in the book, and there are thoughtfully put together individual chapters, and there's a huge amount of work that goes into each book. It's not that we just take stories from the public, mush them together, and publish them. And the funny thing is, the competitors who've come along have reached out to our authors. Like, we'll see that. We'll see them. There's one right now. There's a guy in Hawaii right now who is reaching out to a lot of our authors, because we've been getting emails from our writers saying, hey, who is this guy? Is this okay? And yeah, of course it's okay. It's fine for somebody to reach out to the people who publish with us. Like, they're freelancers. Wherever they can publish is great. So that's going on right now. He's reaching out to our people and asking them for stories. It happens every year. Somebody tries. But I think our quality is amazing. We care so much. We are so incredibly passionate. Like, all of us who work on my team, we dream about Chicken Soup for the Soul. We'll dream about our books, and we'll tell each other the next day, I dreamt about our book last night. But we're really into it. And we know that every story that we select has the potential to change thousands of lives. because we get the letters from the public about what the books have done for them.
That's awesome. So when you're launching a new book, I know you said you're doing about one book a month right now. What is kind of your launch strategy, your launch plan? Can you kind of walk us through kind of the marketing process and what you guys talk about in marketing when you're planning that book launch?
Yeah, so the book launch starts with the original idea for the book. So I'll give you an example. We have a book coming out on December 27th, and I'll take you through the genesis of it right up to what we're planning now. So this book, it's called Chicken Soup for the Soul, Curvy and Confident. The cover photo is supermodel Emmy, who you probably are too young to know who she is, plus you're a guy, but a lot of women will recognize her name. She was the first plus size or full size supermodel back in the 1990s. And of course, now that's much more accepted. Sports Illustrated in their swimsuit issue in early 2016 had a plus size model as one of the 3 cover photos. They had 3 different covers, and she was on one of the covers. They had athletes in there wearing swimsuits who are larger than traditional models. You had Mattel come out with a new curvy Barbie at the beginning of 2016. You have Lane Bryant, which specializes in plus size clothing, running ads on the side of buses now. Syracuse University in their fashion program actually has mannequins now that are plus size, and they're designing for plus size. There's so much more attention now being paid to plus size. So the genesis of this book, which is really a book for women who have body image issues, who want to develop a little more confidence about their appearance. The genesis was back in 2015. I was talking to a friend of mine, Natasha Stoyanov, and she was telling me about her friend Emmy, supermodel Emmy, and she put us together and we talked about this, and we realized that there was a need for a book for these women because the majority of women in America are size 12 or up. And yet the majority of the clothing that you see in the stores is for smaller sizes. And so it's very disheartening for the majority of women to find the clothing that they want, to feel good about themselves. The message that they see, on television is you should be skinny. I mean, you see people who don't look like they eat a celery stick a week. They're just so thin, painfully thin. And we decided we would create this book. And so the first thing I did was I started asking people about it. I asked everybody, would you buy such a book? And they said, absolutely, I would love this book. So then we started collecting stories. We sent out the email to the 6,000 people and posted it on our website. When we start collecting stories, we sometimes find that we're on the wrong track. So if we don't get a lot of stories, then we abandon a book idea. And that happens a lot. Well, we'll just decide not to do a book. But in this case, thousands of stories started coming in. We had definitely struck a responsive chord. So then the thousands of stories came in. A whole team of editors read the stories, narrowed the list down to a few hundred finalists, and then Emmy, Natasha Stoyanov, and I, as the 3 co-authors of the book, read all of these stories. And we selected the 101 that we wanted. And then Natasha did the first round of editing them. I did the second round of editing. And we created the manuscript. And now we have the book. So now we need to market the book. So it turns out that this is a very hot topic. So we're going out to the press and putting this in I guess, context for them and talking about Curvy Barbie, Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, Donald Trump having done all of that fat shaming, all of the bashing of women by their appearance, all of that. It's all top of mind right now. And the press is very interested. And so we have a number of articles that we already know are coming out in the press in December, January. We're setting up television interviews now, setting up radio. I've already set up some radio. Natasha Stoyanov is Canadian, so she's going to be doing our press in Canada because Canada prefers Canadian authors, which makes total sense. And we are very much a joint U.S. and Canadian company. We actually sell more books per capita in Canada than we do in the US. Emmy will be doing our TV for us in the US. I'll be backing them up by doing a lot of radio and press interviews myself. And so it's expensive doing PR. You have to hire a publicity firm. I think that's a shock for most authors. It was something I had to learn as a publisher, that making the book is only the beginning of the battle. Then you need distribution, which luckily we have, but then you need the publicity, which is just as hard for us to get as for anybody. And I know I have friends who have published novels with big publishing firms, St. Martin's and others, and my friends have ended up spending their whole advance hiring a PR firm, and they end up making no money at all because they spend thousands of dollars on publicity to try to light a fire under their books, and then they sell 5,000 copies of the book, which is actually a success for a first-time novel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's it's very interesting. There's a lot of work that goes into it, right? And like you said, you have to once you have the distribution nationally, you have to get that national press as well to get sales moving in the bookstores and so forth.
Yeah, now for us, making a book is very expensive also, because we think that we pay the best rate to freelancers of anybody in our industry, because we pay our freelancers $200 per story, plus we send them 10 free copies of the book, and the books retail for $14.95. And we let them keep the copyright to their stories. And we don't impose any restrictions on their reuse of the stories. So they can take a story that I've edited for them, and now they own it, and they have the copyright to their story, and they can go and sell it to a magazine or make their own book of, their own anthology of their own stories. And we have heard from hundreds of writers that being published by Chicken Soup for the Soul was not only the most rewarding for them financially, but also was a tremendous boost to their careers. In fact, I just got an email yesterday from a guy who has published probably a dozen stories with us over the years, and he just sent us a thank you email and said that he got a TV contract because he was published by Chicken Soup for the Soul. He got a writing contract to write a television show. He lives out in LA. And we have so many people who have told us they got book contracts because having Chicken Soup for the Soul on their writer resumes gave them credibility. It's kind of like an actor getting on Law and Order, like that. Like if you live in New York and you're an actor, you better be on Law and Order, right? That gives you credibility. And I think if you're a nonfiction writer, being in a Chicken Soup for the Soul book and putting that on your resume is very helpful.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. That's awesome. So I know a lot of our listeners would probably love to submit their story to the next book. So can you share with us how they can do that?
Yeah, it's really easy. Write your story in Word, and then you go to our website, chickensoup.com. Scroll down to the bottom, and you'll see something you can click on that says Submit Your Story. When you go there, you'll find 3 tabs. One is our story guidelines, and that will be very helpful. Another tells you possible book topics. It tells you the topics we're currently working on and what the deadlines are. And then the 3rd tab is the actual submission form, and you fill it in, and then there's this little tiny box that looks like it will hold 10 lines, but it will hold your entire story. Just paste your entire Word document in there and then submit it to us. And then you'll hear from us if we want to use the story. We do not send out rejection notices because it's just too hard for us logistically. And also, we're not necessarily rejecting a story if we don't use it right away. We sometimes will come back to you 2 years later and say, hey, you submitted this story for our Random Acts of Kindness book, but it was a great Christmas story, and we didn't use it for Random Acts of Kindness, but we want to use it in our next Christmas book. So you might hear from us years later. The story guidelines is very interesting. I would recommend people read the story guidelines, even if they're not going to submit to us, because they are what we've learned about what creates a great story in the 23 years that we've been in business. And so I think people will find that helpful as writers.
Awesome. So we'll post the link to all that in the show notes so people can submit and also check out the story guidelines as well. And that'll be at publishingprofitspodcast.com. So Amy, this has been an awesome interview. I know you shared just some great information with us, and I really appreciate it. And before you go, can you tell us where people can find out more about Chicken Soup for the Soul and your latest projects and what you're working on?
Yeah, so you go to chickensoup.com, you'll see everything there. And then the other thing is, if you do want to become a nonfiction narrative writer, I know this sounds self-serving, but I actually think it would help to read one of our books, because you'll really get a sense of what makes a good story, how to write a story that flows, that's tight. We hire a lot of journalists instead of people who majored in creative writing, because we want action. And so our books are available everywhere: Walmart, Rite Aid, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Books A Million, Kroger, supermarkets sell them. They're everywhere, but you could even buy one at a used bookstore for a couple of dollars, but it will give you a sense of the kind of writing that works in our segment of publishing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for all your advice and wisdom. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks a lot, Tom.